Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Amaazen Outdoors. This podcast is being presented by Uplnd Outfitters, home of the relentless pants, man. Those things are awesome. I had them out this week, and I pretty much, since I started the partnership with Jason, have been wearing those pants out anytime over the summer here where I had to do any work at the farm or dog training. I've even had them on the boat a little bit. They are tough as nails. I have yet to see a pull 'em thread. I've been in some nasty briars. They really held up a lot better than I thought. I can't recommend them enough. Hunting season is around the corner. Make sure you use discount code Amaazen, and I believe Jason is still offering 20% off on the relentless pants. So pick up a pair before hunting season is upon us, and you're out in the woods with a pair of ripped up pair of pants and sweating, unnecessarily, because Jason's pants and the relentless pants are top notch and breathable, light. So you're going to want them this early season. Make sure you get them now. I also have a quick announcement. We've got another kind of temporary partnership with Chippewa River Custom Rods. Tom is going to be offering 10% off with discount code Amaazen 10. Amaazen 10, and it's all caps. If you decide to call him for a custom rod, just make sure you tell him that you heard about custom rods on Amaazen Outdoors podcast, and he will make sure that you get hooked up with a discount. All that information for both sponsors and partners are going to be in the show notes, so please support the podcast and these great companies. They are really good partners for the podcast, and I would like to see our listeners support them as well. So look them up, Uplnd Outfitters and Chippewa River Custom Rods. Enjoy today's show. Thank you. You are tuned in to Amaazen Outdoors. This is your host, Brian Mays. I have episode 27, I believe, up for bats today. I have a returning guest, Alaina Gerrits. She is the assistant upland bird ecologist for the Wisconsin DNR. She has accepted a new position. She's leaving. Wanted to grab her quick before she took on her new role. Circle back around to the Prairie Chicken episode from earlier this year on season 1. But I also wanted to get a fall outlook for upland game birds in Wisconsin, specifically ruffed grouse, a little bit of pheasants. We chat a little bit about Wisconsin sharp-tailed grouse, as well as turkeys. We explore a few myths too. So tune in. It's a great episode. I intended to only have Alaina on for a half an hour, get her interview and combine my interview with our podcast sponsor, Jason over at Uplnd Outfitters. But Alaina and I went on for an hour, so she got a full episode, and here we go. Enjoy today's show. So I have a returning guest to the podcast, Alaina Gerrits. I'm really excited you came back, and we got a chance to interview you before you kind of transitioned out of your role, and hopefully into a role that you get to spend more time in your home backyard.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
but thank you for coming back on the podcast. So, Alaina, again, if you want to give a little bit of credentials, and then I've got a couple of things we want to touch base on.
Sure. So I was formerly the assistant upland wildlife ecologist for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, dealing with things like pheasant, turkey, grouse, and small game. And now I have transitioned into a permanent position. I am now the wildlife biologist for Marinette County. So I'm based out of Wasaki now, and I deal with not only all things upland, but also, our major game species like deer and bear and things like that.
Well, I know from our previous conversation that you're a bow hunter, and you have a tie into the bear hunting community. So I got to imagine that's also going to be pretty exciting to be able to have a say into the not just birds in that area, but also the big game species.
Absolutely, for sure. I think now my time is going to be shifted a lot more towards deer, which is exciting, and I'm excited for the variety of the job too.
So in that new role, you're responsible then for the wildlife biology of that county. Will you have people underneath you that do field work, or will you actually be out in the field doing more field work?
Both. So I don't directly supervise anyone, but I have a couple of technicians that I work with, and they're going to be doing more field work than I do. I probably will get
That's
in.
kind of what I meant.
Yep. I'll probably get into the field maybe 40 to 50% of the time, depending on the season. But I'm lucky to have a couple of technicians that I work with that have a lot of years experience under their belt. So I'm really hoping to actually learn a lot from them.
That's really cool. If you have an opportunity to just learn from people who've been doing what you're doing, or you have an interest in, and they can. I was just talking to a guy this morning. That handing down of knowledge by working with people or communicating with them or having them in your friend circle. It's the only way you really get the information.
Yeah.
You can take tests and read books all you want, but if you have no application skills for it, it's kind of useless knowledge. So, yeah, it's much better. I like kind of the apprentice programs and things like that for people, because I think it's a great learning environment.
Absolutely. And I think it's no different in this field.
Well, and two, you look at it, you've got technicians working for you, so they're in a slightly different role. Being able to look at it from a standpoint where you're able to learn things, you got to bring yourself a little bit of humility into the equation, because sometimes, you might learn something from somebody who doesn't have a title that's as nice as yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the utmost respect for the people that I work with, and it's a unique situation coming into it, being a younger person and working with people who have a lot more experience than you, and just feeling like I have so much to learn from them. It seems silly sometimes that I have the biologist title.
Well, and I think if you carry around that attitude, it's a lot better for your work environment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because those people who actually do have the knowledge have been out there grinding and cutting the teeth for a long time, and you have a lot to learn from. If you come in without an attitude of an open mind and wanting to learn from them, it can create some animosity, and I've seen those types of scenarios not go so well. So,
yep, me too.
you have to, especially as a younger person, I think in going into that environment, you kind of have to, even though, they might not report to you or you report to them, you still have to kind of cut your teeth with them and earn a little respect.
Yep, absolutely.
And you kind of do that by getting your hands dirty and wanting to learn more.
Yeah, I think that transcends everything. I mean, whether you're working in a career or just your personal life, no matter what, when you walk into situations like that, you have to respect the people who have been doing it and understand that you can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, we were actually talking about it. I was interviewing a fellow podcaster who's got a very successful podcast about bird hunting, and we were kind of talking about the community and the kind of the old adage or the old guard of some of the people I know that are older than myself, they get into a box in hunting, and I got 1 or 2 spots to go to, and somebody from West Virginia pulls up and they're in their spot. And, it's, you can take that situation and turn it into whatever you want it to. You can ruin your day, or you can talk to those guys and figure out that they actually knew a few things more than you did about the area, and maybe actually have a better day than you would have if you just would have not talked to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about always I carry that around as much as possible. We all go through funks and things in life that sometimes prevents us from being that way. But anyways, that's why I wanted to get you back on the podcast, because I really resonated a little bit with the way I like you, Alaina. We had a good conversation
Yeah,
last
absolutely.
time, and you
Me too.
got the knowledge I want to know.
Right.
So let's circle around really quickly as we kind of get into the podcast here about something we touched base on. We dove directly into the Prairie Chicken topic last time when you were on the podcast, because I wanted to really highlight Wisconsin Prairie Chickens and kind of the unknown, at least mostly on a national scale, that we even have some here. But today, I wanted to touch base a little bit more on some of the other game birds that might be huntable, but I wanted to circle around and get an update from you about the prairie chickens and where you're at with that 10-year process. And, that you're taking off, and it sounds like from what you told me, you're going to make some commitments to see that process through before you fully exit the upland bird ecologist position. So yeah, could you give the listeners a little update on kind of what's going on and, where you're at with the process?
Absolutely. So I started on this project when I had a boss. That was back in July of 2019. That was the month that he left. And so then I took over completely in July 2020, I completely took over the process and leading that project. And we made a lot of really good progress and met up with our external advisory committee stakeholders, some folks from universities and different stakeholder groups. And we created a first draft that is pretty much ready for public comment at this point. And in the last couple of months, there's been a little bit of stagnation with it, just because I was applying for a new position and interviewing for it and didn't really know where the plan was going to go. But I'm really excited because I'm going to be able to take this plan forward and hopefully get it to the finish line sometime in the next year. We're hoping before springtime even would be the most ideal. But as far as updates on the plan, there isn't anything too new since the last time we talked, other than there's been a few minor revisions made. And I'm just waiting to get the final draft back from my supervisors. And in the next couple of months, we should be opening up a public comment period where the public can weigh in. And then there'll be some public meetings where people can attend and pick my brain on it and things like that. So hopefully that gets finished in the next few months here.
And you're going to see that process all the way through until the plan is at least submitted to then the DNR?
Yes,
or
the NRB.
The action committee?
Yes, exactly. I will be taking it to the finish line and presenting it to the Natural Resources Board for approval sometime in the next few months.
Awesome. Well, I hope I'll try to update some of my Instagram followers as well. If you do in the interim, when that public comment period is open, please let me know, and I will push that out to some of the people I know who are interested in it.
Absolutely. That would be great. That's one of my concerns with the plan, is I want to make sure that we get a range of comments from different people, not just people who are either really enthusiastic about chickens or really anti-chicken. I want somewhere in the middle and try to touch a lot of people with the topic. So
fantastic. So let's kind of touch or let's move on away from the chickens, because again, it's a long process, and you've got some things to push forward. And maybe at the end, maybe we can touch base, have you on for like a half episode or something, if once you kind of wrap that thing up, to just I want to see this through with you too, because I really don't want to leave the listeners hanging. So
yeah,
but we can touch base about that offline. With the onset of grouse season, then shortly woodcock opener, and then pheasant opener later this year, I really wanted to touch base and kind of find out what is going on with the bird populations, and kind of how the spring drumming report came out. and how that translates into what hunters might be able to see in the fall, because we've had a lot of variables that kind of, I think, are worrying people.
Yeah, certainly. So we've seen with our Ruffed Grouse drumming survey this spring a 6% statewide decline in the abundance of breeding grouse. And I know that that headline, a decrease in abundance, always raises red flags for people, but our ruffed grouse population in Wisconsin follows a pretty typical 10-year population cycle. And we expect that the peaks in those population cycles are in years that end with 9 or 0. So that would likely be last year that it peaked. And unfortunately, in 2020, we weren't able to do the survey because of COVID-19 and the safer at home order. So we'll never be able to say definitively that that is when it peaked, but that is definitely my suspicion. So seeing this 6% decrease is a very expected, very normal decline in the population following its cycle. If it was something like a 30% decline, I would be a lot more concerned, but a 6% decline just shows that we're gradually going down into basically the low of that population cycle. So I don't think there's anything to be concerned about on that end. With that being said, brooding conditions.
Real quickly, too.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Before you touch base on brooding conditions for the year, what is the margin of error? And if you don't know, that's fine. But I mean, 6% seems like it could be well within or close to the margin of error. And given no data, I understand where you're going with the kind of not wanting to pin down the peak of the cycle. But I guess my point is even though we saw a decline this year, that kind of make a little bit more of an argument for your point. I want to imagine that the margin of error is probably within like 3 or 6%.
It is a very small margin of error, and you can look at the results online on our webpage. But basically,
and I'll include a link to that probably in the show notes anyway.
Sure.
So.
The way that we calculate that abundance is by using raw data of the number of drums heard per stop. So on this route biologists or technicians take, they have designated areas they stop and listen for drums. And when we average all of that out this year, I'm looking at the graph, and for 2021, it was about 1.1 drums per stop, and that's for the whole state. And the 95% confidence interval for that puts it somewhere between 0.9 drums per stop or 1.2 drums per stop. So it's a very small confidence interval, which is good. That means we can be more confident in our results. And there's such an abundance of data that goes into this survey and this report that it leaves us pretty confident in the results.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. So even though, I mean, 6% decline, I think in anything in people these days, they freak out, but we do have such great grouse cover and an abundance of grouse in comparison to other areas in the country that, we do go through these cycles. And even on some of the worst years that you guys report drumming, I've had some of the best years hunting. I think a lot of people stay home.
Right, absolutely. And one thing
there's give and take.
Yep. And one thing I always try to remind people is, people get upset by any sort of decrease or any sort of negative headline. But last year in Wisconsin, looking at our small game hunter survey, we estimated that we harvested over 200,000 grouse in the state. So there's still a lot of opportunity out there.
That's a lot of grouse.
It's a ton.
I've been out a little bit so far since the kind of preseason training season kind of allowed us to get out. And, I'm not seeing grouse in some of that marginal habitat that I would have expected to, but I'm also on some research missions and scouting missions. So I'm always on new cover. The minute I step into stuff that I'm super confident on that there should be birds there, I've been seeing birds. So personally, the grouse thing in itself, I think there's been some decent numbers around for the last few years, and I'm not seeing anything that's out of the norm. But we did have the big caveat of, being pretty dry, and you were going to go there, talk about some of the brood successional conditions. And I'm assuming, too, some of the fact that the surveyed drumming counts don't account for the summer brood months.
Yep.
A lot happens between when you guys survey and the season gets kicked off.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. So we did experience some drought conditions in Wisconsin this year, early summer mostly. We're sort of getting back on track with precipitation now. And certain areas of the state had a lot worse than others, but basically, for game birds, dry conditions when they're nesting and brooding isn't really a bad thing as long as it's not excessive to the point where it's hindering things like insect production. It's a good thing because before those little chicks can fly, they're pretty susceptible to mortality from things like big rain events. So that
Oh,
was
yes.
good for game bird broods. And just in my personal observations, I flushed a couple of grouse broods on the national forest this year, and I have seen more turkey poults than I've ever seen in my life. So I think that brooding conditions were just absolutely excellent this summer.
I will say they were for sure for the turkeys, and I'm not a biologist, and that's why I wanted to touch in. I've seen a lot of turkeys with high numbers of chicks. So something tells me that their conditions were right for good brood rearing.
Yes. And
now we are experiencing a little bit of a turkey boom in Wisconsin. The boys down in Missouri are not experiencing the same conditions. And, you know, they've done a fairly decent job managing their habitat. So those ebbs and flows of things are also, I think, playing a little bit in on the turkey stuff. However, when you're talking about brood rearing specifically for grouse, if those chicks can make it, there has to be enough food around for grouse as well.
yeah, absolutely. Turkeys are a great barometer for other game birds because turkeys are a lot more visible. They're a lot less secretive or cryptic compared to a ruffed grouse. I mean, you'll see turkeys bugging on the side of the road all the time. So if there's a lot of turkeys, you're going to see a lot of them, and they really are a good indicator for other game bird broods that you're not going to see as readily.
So real quickly, since you brought up that topic, and I got you on hook here. I've seen since I've entered the social media realm again, which I was a recluse for about 10 years because of the vile nature of people and the uneducated trying to educate the uneducated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see a lot of bickering, depending on which forum you're in, about the competition of turkeys in some of the northern land here. And I especially have heard it in some of the sharp-tail grouse boards in both Minnesota and Wisconsin, some of the ruffed grouse stuff, some of the pheasant stuff. I think a lot of outdoorsmen who have one particular interest and either their spot or their knowledge base is corrupted, and they have to then forced to be going out and trying to learn, kind of relearning things because they had to move to a new area or something or whatever it may be. I think it forces people to kind of make an easy excuse for things. And I do believe that there's some non-truths out there about turkeys competing with other game bird species. Do you guys find any of that as we're kind of experiencing a boom in Wisconsin with turkeys? Are you seeing a detriment to any of these other game bird species specifically?
No. So this
I
one
don't
gets me
think
so
so, but
fired up.
I really wanted to hear it from a
Yeah.
biologist perspective.
Yeah, so the major reason why we're seeing this happen in Wisconsin, ruffed grouse and turkeys are a perfect example of it. And in the recent past, since the 80s, we have seen a huge change from young successional early growth forests, especially things like aspen, that are maturing and they're turning over to more shade tolerant stands of things like red and sugar maple. And forests are just becoming more mature. The understories are becoming more open. This is because a lot of paper mills have closed down in the state. So paper prices are depressed, certain timber markets are depressed, and private landowners also seem to be more hesitant to conduct timber harvests because there's always been this social stigma that cutting trees is bad, it's bad for wildlife, which is not true at all. And the fact of the matter is, ruffed grouse are young forest specialists. They rely on aspen stands ages 0 to 25. That's basically what they specialize in. That provides the overhead concealment they need, the food that they need. Turkeys, on the other hand, are way more generalist. They can adapt to a lot more habitat types, and they thrive in older, more mature forests. Turkeys like to have an open understory that they can look through and see predators. Grouse are the opposite, since they're so small and since aerial predators are such a big factor for their life history. They need to have that really thick overhead concealment. So I have never seen any evidence that has ever shown that turkeys are competing with ruffed grouse in their diet, nor have I ever seen a turkey predate a ruffed grouse, whether that's a nest or a chick or an adult. We hear that all the time, and I'm not buying it. I think it's the changes in habitat, and for whatever reason, people seem less apt to accept that. They want to blame it on the turkeys because we have seen such an explosion in their population. It seems like an easy correlation, but it's not. I don't think that there's any fact behind that theory.
I tend to agree with your stance. We look at too the really the introduction of the wild turkey here into Wisconsin. I mean, how many years ago? I just look back in my history of turkey hunting, and it wasn't until I was out of college that turkey hunting really even became an opportunity for me in Wisconsin. So I'm talking about, the last 20 years. Now I know turkey populations had been booming in other areas of the state at that point, but I was in Northeast Wisconsin, and we didn't really see many turkeys. And then all of a sudden it was like somebody flipped a light switch. And, I think at the same time, the game bird population in Wisconsin had already been declining so drastically that it's like asking somebody to look in the mirror and go, hey, what's the worst quality of yourself and how are you going to fix it? It's not an easy conversation. And I think if there's an easier scapegoat to point your finger at, a lot of times as humans, I think we always try to take the path of least resistance. And I think that just inherently happens with this conundrum.
Yep. I think you hit the nail.
Birds are declining, and it's, an easy thing to go, well, there's more turkeys now. And logically, I think a lot of people would think that. I mean, it's the first thing I think most people would draw a conclusion to. I think it's harder to draw the conclusion, well, if the conditions are right for the turkeys, then why is there not more game birds, and I think there's still answers out there for that particular question. But, you look at pheasants specifically, they're not a native species to North America. So given the right conditions, they boomed, and now they don't have the right conditions, and they're not going to exist like they did. It's just unfortunately a problem that exists, and it's way too complicated, and it's way too far down the path to really revert in a direction that needs to be to make a huge impact like that. Farms are getting bigger, and in order for really that to happen, you need to go to smaller grain, smaller farms. And it's just it's not the way the world is going today. So I think people have to, again, look in the mirror and go, well, I'm 20 years older. So what's the new tricks for the trade today?
Yeah.
Cause they change, I mean, think about the old timers that used to be able to throw a piece of metal out in the ocean and catch big tuna. And today, there's all kinds of different secrets that you got to do things like that. So, as sportsmen, I think it's pretty easy to get stuck in a rut and blame other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I understand, like you said, I understand where the theory comes from, because the timing of it is suspect. Once we started having turkey seasons and once they started booming at the same time, that's when we were starting to lose large tracts of young forest, and they've just continued to mature over the decades. And you're right, people love an easy scapegoat, and it would be so nice if we could just give more turkey tags out and solve the ruffed grouse issue, but that's just not. It's not going to work. They're not causing one another's demise.
Well, and then you want to make an even more finger pointing argument, sharp-tailed grouse. In that particular part of the state, it's the Barrens region. I mean, some of that timber in there is probably the most mature it's been since humans have stepped foot on this planet. we've been altering that landscape up there into, smaller tracts of land and developing potholes and, these little places where these birds used to hang out, and they were such an island species to begin with. And now people are seeing turkeys all over up there. And, it's very easy to point it at the turkey when it's really, there's a lot more work that needs to be done than just blaming the turkey.
Yeah, and
on solving that problem.
Sharp-tailed grouse and really any prairie grouse, they're so area sensitive that having just a small patch of woods between two suitable habitat areas is going to really throw them off. It's going to really hurt their movements and dispersal, where a turkey can walk through the suburbs or live in the suburbs eating out of a bird feeder its whole life and it'll be just fine. And I think people don't take account of that either, just how sensitive a prairie grouse is versus how generalist a turkey is.
Well, I've definitely seen my fair share of large strutting toms in the spring, not only in the front yard, but I've seen them in the middle of the city in front of entrances of, Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a green space.
Yeah.
They are just about as adaptable as I would say coyotes are, and some of the other
absolutely
pesty type critters like coons and possums.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. And, I think if people are so concerned about birds that they point the finger at another bird, then they need to look in the mirror and go, what are you doing to help solve the problem?
Yeah.
And, I'm a person that I can say, well, I'm not always as, forthcoming with my cash these days. It's a lot harder to earn than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's even harder to keep it. But I put my money where my mouth was, and I sent a nice check over to the Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society, and and that's the big key is if you get so fired up about one bird, then put your money where your mouth is with the bird that you're trying to protect, because I think today that a lot of the information you get to is already drawn out to be polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to not look at the current little headline that you have and dig into the issue and A, educate yourself, and B, give to the people who are fighting for the cause.
Yeah.
Instead of pointing fingers.
Yeah. Not only give to those organizations. That's great. That's a huge impact. But if you're a private property owner yourself, even if you have a small woodlot, 10, 20 acres, you can still make an impact for something like a ruffed grouse. Their home range is only a couple of acres throughout most of the year. If you can incorporate some sustainable timber harvest onto your land, that is going to make a huge impact. And that's one of the best things you can do as well.
Well, I bought 32 acres last year, and I told my wife that there was a couple pieces of equipment that I needed. And, one would think, oh, well, UTV or tractor or whatever. And the first piece of equipment I bought was a chainsaw.
Yep. Good call.
I've got 15 acres of timber.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a challenge as a small property owner, and where current lumber prices and the conditions are in Wisconsin, I can't get anybody to come in and log that in a perspective that would leave me an opportunity to deer hunt. Yeah, I would have to deer hunt from a box blind because they would level it.
Yep.
And I think that as a private landowner, that's very off-putting, and I understand the dynamic to that. But one also needs firewood. One also has the responsibility to mold that piece of property in what you feel is best for your scenario. Yeah. So I contacted the Ruffed Grouse Society, and I contacted Pheasants Forever because I have 50-50 old growth pasture and timber. And I had them come out. Shout out to Corey and Jared. Mm-hmm. They took a morning. They walked the property with me. They went back. And without much effort on their part, they put together a plan for me, an outlook. Here's a piece of your property. This is what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of information, but enough to guide someone to have the conversations with either loggers or start tackling it yourself. And, you don't have, for me, I'm looking at clearing an acre. I'm going to take an acre,
Mm-hmm.
I'll let it sit, and I'm going to take another acre next year. And as soon as I kind of get to that 3-acre part, I'm going to sit back for a minute and see how it goes and then redo the plan. But I could do it all in 1 year and let it sit for a couple of years. I'll be lucky to get an acre done this winter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm by myself. I don't have a tractor. I'm going to fall a bunch of trees and drag them out with, a big long tow strap and chains
Mm-hmm.
with my truck. But that's what I'm going to be doing in the wintertime to help improve my property, both for my opportunity, but because I want wildlife there. And I understand that new growth and new successional forest it's not only good for just birds, but it's good habitat for whitetail, for bear, for every wildlife species. So, it's a challenge as I'm seeing a lot of the old covers that I used to run. Even before I had a dog, I used to just walk for grouse.
Mm-hmm.
They're no longer really grouse cover anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of logging going on, and there's really no whining to be done. But the dynamic it's definitely changed, and especially from the paper mill perspective, I'm very interested to see where it goes over the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, me too. I really hope we see some changes because right now it's been hard. Like you said, if you have a smaller property, it's really hard to get a logging crew in there, especially if you want to do something like a select harvest where you're marking individual trees and taking them out. It's going to be hard to entice a logger to come out there and do that because he's got to figure out a way to cover his overhead. And if his travel time to the closest mill if it's too far, then it's going to have to be a large harvest to make it worth their time. So hearing that you're going to do some of that stuff yourself that's awesome. And I think that is a great experience for landowners. It's such an enriching thing to watch. And when you have your own blood, sweat, and tears in it, and you cut these trees down and drag them out, and then in a few years, you see these young aspens coming up, and you're going to see the deer browsing on them, and you're going to see the grouse in there. It is such a rewarding experience. It's a neat thing.
Yeah, and we're really lucky. We've got a little slough, and I've got great spring woodcock habitat, and I have good fall woodcock habitat. I've seen pheasant out there. I've seen grouse out there. So the animals are there. They're just not living there because the habitat has I've got poplar trees that are 25 years old,
Mm-hmm.
30 years old, and some of them are even older. Some of them are so old that they're either rotted out and
Yeah.
fallen down.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time since it's been logged out. And then on top of it, I've got buckthorn in there that's come in the understory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's even more of a complex issue that I want to take care of. But again, as a individual or family that has a piece of property, it right now it's very, very difficult to get even an 80-acre parcel.
Mm-hmm.
I lease a 200-acre farm. We had 80 acres of it logged due to storm damage. Family had white oak and red oak in super high numbers with really good maple.
Mm-hmm.
And like the type of wood that Walmart came out and marked which trees they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like extremely high value veneer oak.
Mm-hmm.
They had just a damned old time trying to log this place in a fashion that they felt that they could still leave some of the forest.
Yeah.
And bless her heart, Heidi, she's in her 60s. She's got sisters, and her dad passed away. They, mom and dad raised them on the farm. They had 3 daughters. She, doesn't really have an authority figure kind of guy to walk into the equation. And she's dealing with a logger and feeling like she kind of got taken advantage of in certain aspects. And, they had a contract for 200 acres of it, and they got to do the 80. because the logging markets died out because nobody was taking oak last year. And then all of a sudden they turned back on this year, and, they went in and cherry picked trees.
Yeah.
The contract was for storm damage. And when you're taking out high value timber that they don't want taken out, regardless of whatever wildlife management plan that they would have done, the equation, so even when you mention loggers to certain people, there's a cringe.
Yeah.
I think too, driving around all the storm damaged properties, I saw 80% of the landowners around me up there clear cut. And I'm probably one of the only guys driving around going, I'm smiling. Like, this is the next 10 years. This is going to blow up for grouse. And the deer hunting around is going to be amazing because of the amount of cover we're going to have. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to portray that to, I think, the average hunter.
It is.
And the average landowner.
It is. And there are a lot of caveats, like you said, with any sort of logging project too. And one thing I would highly, highly recommend to private landowners is either speaking at least with your local DNR forester and seeing if he can come out for a site visit. Another huge helpful tool is a private forester. So someone who is not affiliated with the logging company who's going to come in and log, but actually someone who is on their own and not affiliated with DNR or the logging operation will go in and mark those trees for you to make sure that you are getting out exactly what you want and not what the loggers want necessarily. And then they'll go back in.
And they build a buffer between you and the
exactly.
The logger.
You don't have to
develop the plan.
Yes.
I told my landowner, and she didn't, and nothing against her, but I told her, hey, bring in the Ruffed Grouse Society, bring in the county forester, have those two work together on developing a timber harvest plan for you. Within consideration for wildlife. You wanted a woods, you wanted us to stay on as leasees. Do it. And she didn't. She went out and hired a good logger, but she didn't have the plan. And she, again, she's not a logger.
Right.
And the average landowner doesn't understand the value of their timber.
Right.
They tell you not to invest in things you don't know, or, everybody wants to learn, try to learn what they're getting involved with. But when you're doing timber harvests, a lot of times landowners are just taking the word of the logger, and you can definitely get told the wrong things. And I don't want to give the bad impression on loggers.
Oh yeah. There's
these
good
guys
and bad ones.
gave plenty of money to my landowner for the timber they harvested. But if you don't have some way to hold them accountable from the get-go, you're not going to have the outcome that you expect.
Yeah.
And that's just the bottom line.
Yep. Absolutely.
If you want to have a certain expectation, you better well damn plan it out and have some accountability chain with that logger. Otherwise, you're not going to end up seeing this result that you had pictured in your head.
For sure. And I think that a huge problem with it too is there's so many programs in Wisconsin that you can get enrolled in to have either wildlife managers or foresters help you make a detailed plan with clear objectives for what you want for your land. They will help you with this. You do not have to do it by yourself. And, there's like the Ruffed Grouse Society, like you were talking about, there's private land foresters that'll come out and help you with your objectives. DNR has a deer management assistance program where we can walk your land and help recommend different timber harvest strategies for wildlife. You can hire a consultant, a private forester. So there's a lot of options. And I just think that there unfortunately isn't awareness that these programs exist.
Well, and there's some stigma about it too. A lot of times I think from a traditional landowner's perspective and the rollout of kind of the legacy CRP stuff, I think it gave a big impression to, I know, my dad's generation of, well, screw that. I get a tax break, but I got to lock my land up and all of this stuff. And having that long-term kind of hook in some of the programs is definitely an off-putting public opinion point. But however, when I had the guys from Pheasant Forever and Ruffed Grouse Society out, I was amazed to find out at what kind of funding mechanisms you could get.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, they'll even send crews out to help you do it by yourself
Mm-hmm.
and keep your costs low. There's equipment available depending on the program.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of these long-term hooks like some of the original CRP rollouts. There's some flexibility with it. It's a lot different than I was really surprised when I started digging into it. I'm going, wow, this isn't what I thought.
Yeah.
So I think that the public opinion and awareness piece, like you're saying, is definitely true. But I think moreover, there's been a lot that has changed. And I think because of some of the old stigma that maybe people haven't necessarily dug in and understood it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know the big one that people always think about is the managed forest law, which is an excellent program in Wisconsin where private landowners get that property tax incentive, but they have to enroll in a 25 or 50-year management plan that's tells them how they should be harvesting their timber, which I totally get. Private landowners are leery of that because it's like, that's a long commitment and I don't want to be told what to do with my land. But all of the practices they're sustainable and they're excellent for wildlife. And we're not going to recommend anything that's going to be detrimental to you or your future and your goals. But I understand if you don't want to be enrolled in something that's that long term, there's more short term stuff like with the Young Forest Partnership and the Deer Management Assistance Program. DMAP is a great one because if you have enough acres, a biologist and a forester will come walk your land with you. We give you objectives and goals based on the things that you want to see on your property, and we'll write you a management plan. And at that point, it's up to you what you want to do with it. You don't have to sign a contract. You don't have to meet those objectives. It's up to you. So that's an excellent program if you're leery about those long-term commitments.
Yeah, and I definitely was, and I haven't made any commitments yet. But I've only held the deed for inside of a year.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even built my house on the property yet. And that once that piece goes in, once I'm there full time, then I'll know exactly what program fits me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the key for a lot of listeners is that, hell, I even talked to these guys before I broke ground on anything. It
Mm-hmm.
was the first thing I did. I wanted to know more about what I had bought and what I could do to improve both my experience but really the wildlife experience, because I knew that was going to improve my experience. So it really was, what can I do to improve both birds, deer, bear, wildlife in general,
Sure,
on my property. And I know I have a little piece of something that's unique because hell, everybody that is around me go, oh, you own that? Huh? Yeah. And then tell me about all the big deer they see on the corner there.
Mm-hmm.
And hell, I really kicked myself earlier this week. I was running bear baits, which is a daily thing, unfortunately, because I got like 7 or 8 bears coming in because there's no food.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nuts. I'll tell you a little bit about that. I know I have to get going because I got to go run a bear bait yet today too. But on like Tuesday last week, a fisher was killed on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And, fishers but they're more common than they used to be, I think.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I definitely see a lot more of them than I used to, but you got to have the right habitat for a fisher.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be out in the middle of a cornfield. And I think it shows kind of the diversity to my little area, and that, I'm really kicking myself I didn't call the DNR and get a tank for it.
Yeah.
Damn thing was probably 30 pounds, I bet.
Oh, wow. That's a big one.
I was it was a big one. I was really surprised that it was still there, even over the weekend. My wife's like, why didn't you call? I'm like, well, you wanted me home. I had a very limited time to bear bait and making the run. Like, I just figured when I saw it the first time, so it wasn't going to be there. And then it's still there.
Yeah, it's probably not in very good shape anymore.
Oh, no. This weekend, it was definitely not salvageable. Otherwise, I would have had time because I was up there for the full weekend. But yeah. So real quickly, let's finish up with I know we talked on the phone earlier in the summer. You guys are getting back to your normal pheasant stocking program in Wisconsin.
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I don't want to say anything more. I have a love-hate relationship with pheasants, and It's great for people to get out and experience pheasant hunting in Wisconsin. You guys do a good job. So on that note, I won't share any of my woes.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so we're back to our normal stocking program this year. We're going to be releasing about 75,000 birds on roughly 90 different properties across the state. It's a really extensive program. That's an increase from the 50,000 that we stocked last year because of COVID. The only difference this year is that our day-old chick program has been suspended for this year. We're hoping to start back up next year. The reason that that was suspended was because of COVID-19 concerns, but then also there's been an outbreak in avian influenza. And that program is basically where we trade pheasants and chicks between different sportsmen's clubs, and sometimes they release them on their lands and sometimes they release them on ours. And when they take the chicks back to rear them, there were concerns that they could contract avian influenza, and then when we took them back, we might be introducing that to our game farm. So that was the big reason why that was discontinued. But that aside, we're expecting good opportunities this year to pheasant hunt.
Cool. I know that Wisconsin has a couple programs too, where you have put and takes where hen pheasants are able to be shot. Is there any changes to those kind of islands of areas? I know there's one over in like the Chippewa Falls area, and I think there's a couple more in southern Wisconsin where you guys release both male and female pheasants, and they're legal to hunt both.
Yep, there's no changes to that. I would just recommend that hunters look at the regulations closely before they go afield, because there are different regulations for each property. Some of the larger properties have hen and rooster, so you can harvest both, and then some of them don't, so you need to make sure that you're identifying the rooster before you harvest them. And other properties also have a 12 p.m. closure, and that's for some of our large properties, and that's to give our staff an opportunity to go stock without having to interfere with hunters. It also gives the birds a chance to settle in before they're targeted. So just check your regulations and make sure that before you go out in the field, you know which the regulations are for your specific property.
Yeah, and I tend to be a little bit selfish in the way I think about those things. I'm in kind of I hunt some of the best grouse cover and woodcock cover this state has to offer. So I tend not to, because of the rules. And I know, like, I'm usually really good now with like Onyx and some of the other hunting apps. But prior to that, it was like, well, I don't want to carry around a map and make sure I'm in the right property.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down there. But yeah, and I don't really do a whole lot of pheasant hunting in Wisconsin anymore because I'm so far west that I can get out and do some of the things that some of the guys on the eastern side of the state have to drive 8, 9, 10 hours for. So I definitely don't want to hinder anybody from going out and trying to do that with my own opinions. So
I
just have such a love for the native game birds that, it's one of those things when you think about it, it's a complex thing. So
I get it. It's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody else. They definitely steal a lot of the funding in the limelight, but on the return of that, a lot of people, the first game bird they ever shot, I know for myself, for the uplands, it was a pheasant. And it was the pheasants that led me into the natives and having such a love for them that, again, love-hate relationship.
Yeah, they're a great bird to get started on as a new hunter. And also all the habitat management
efforts. And they taste good.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. And all the habitat management efforts that are basically spearheaded by Pheasants Forever, pheasant hunters are going to help all of our grassland bird species. So they're not so bad.
No, and they help the whitetails. I mean, yes. I'm not going to lie. Over by me, I've seen some of the biggest whitetails come out of very, very, very grassy habitats. We'll put it that way. So, and a lot of those different habitats were either, encouraged by the DNR or directly managed by the DNR or Fish and Wildlife. So, it's good. I understand that. Mm-hmm. I just want the limelight to be off the pheasant and be on the native game bird. Yeah. That's it.
I get that.
And I'm
too.
selfish for that. So
they're not as pretty though. A ruffed grouse isn't as colorful.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't know. I think, like a Merms quail or a sage grouse is way prettier
That's
than a
true.
pheasant.
That's
But,
true.
that's all personal preference. It's kind of like what car you drive. So,
Yep.
um, let's finish out. There was one thing I wanted to touch base with you before I let you go here. Pheasants, grouse, prairie chickens. We talked about all that. I'm just running a blank today. I'm thinking about baiting bears. So
Yep.
maybe we can just finish. I'll give you a little update. Yeah, our area has been so dry that, I don't know if this podcast is going to release quite before I get out. I been talking about this on a number of episodes that I'm kind of rolling together and pushing out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping to get that done before we can hunt on Wednesday, but it's getting a little tough. I've got a lot to do before that because right behind that is grouse opener.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can get done, but I got a big sow coming in that she's been dry now a couple of years, and she's been a problem bear, I believe,
Okay.
for a couple of the neighbors. And but she's been kind of nocturnal, and I've had a little bit of a dynamic happen with the bait site because I had a big sow or a big boar coming in who's really been the big target bear for me.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would like to take out a sow because we just have so many bears, and I know it's not ideal, but where we're at, it's not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad. So I've got like 7, 8, maybe 9 bears. You know how hard they are to judge on a camera,
Absolutely.
between which one's different. But when you got 3 bears on the bait site that are all between 125 and 175, 200 pounds, that there's at least a few extra stragglers, But yeah, I've had. I thought the sow and her 2 cubs were gonna take over the bait site, and they didn't. They moved on.
Good. That's good.
And yeah, but I've had this one because I did last year. I just threw a big old log out and put my bait in there, and then capped it with another cut log.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of made a huge mess of it. So it was really hard every time I went out to, keep up with the regulations and make sure all the bait's in the container and everything else. And so this year I dug a big old hole and I got a long log, almost 4-foot log. And I dug like 2.5 feet down and finally hit enough crap that I wasn't going to go any further. So I had this thing packed in there. And this 125-pound bear, he came in one day and he just, I want to the bottom of this thing. And he ripped that whole thing. And ever since then, there's been these 3 smaller bears coming in. And I mean, I swore I saw one in there 2 days ago when I went in and baited that was just waiting for me.
Oh yeah. They get pretty hip to it.
Oh yeah, they get real hip to it. I mean, it's like 30 minutes every time, if not less, that some of them are coming in. And yeah, the last couple nights, the big boar and that big sow showed up, but there haven't been anything there. So I'm hoping that the trap is set. Yes. I'm really hoping, like everything that I wanted to have happen has happened, but and then of course my cuddy back fucking, excuse my language, battery died yesterday. So I've got no intel about really what happened, but it's, that's fine. I'll change that this afternoon when I get up there. But yeah, it's been set up for a potentially really good season. I think the boar, I'm guessing on the hoof or bear paw, I'm guessing he's over 3. I don't think he's over 4, but he's a 6.5 foot bear.
That's excellent. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a trophy. I mean, that's a real trophy. That's a hell of a lot better than the average bear that's taken. So I think the 3 that are on the bait site eating everything up all day long is probably about the average.
Oh yeah, and that sounds exactly average for what we harvest in the state. Yeah,
and the sow, she's bigger than the boar. I don't know how much bigger, but the loggers were in there this summer, and they're from Ladysmith, and Right, that's a big bear,
Yeah.
and they called her belly dragger. She came in last year, and we had 2 bait sites on 200 acres, and I had 2 of my friends up that had tags and they wanted to hunt. So um, I knew I was going to get a tag, and I was like, it doesn't hurt to set up a bait site and have it be there for a couple of years
Sure.
to improve your hunt. And so I had them up, and they harvested a 200-pound bear, and they were waiting around for one of the bigger ones, but they only hunted 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got all season. It's the property that I run, and I'm down to 1 bait site, and there's really no berries this year. I don't know if you guys seeing that up by you, but out in the western part of the state, there really isn't a lot of berries. We got a lot of acorns, but not a lot of berries.
Yeah, the raspberries were pretty good this year, and then the blackberries were pretty bad. But yeah, acorns are starting to drop really good now, and they like those. But I've heard really, really good field reports. One of the local meat processors in this area said that he's had 73 bears come in so far, which is a lot more compared to normal since the season just started for hounds up here on Wednesday. And our crew got 6 so far. They're doing really good. And I've heard a lot of other field reports that the weather conditions have just been perfect, especially for running dogs.
Yes.
But I think you're going to have a great season. I think you should have some good luck.
I do too. And I think I'm going to hold out. I'm not going to, I really want to put bear hunting beside me, hit a little ruffed grouse. And then I wanted to really run out and do the sharp tails out in North Dakota, Montana. But bear tag in my area only comes along so often. And so I'm hoping I can get it done early. But I do have the cojones and the patience to wait it out. And being a bait sitter this year, this bear that the loggers called belly dragger, I called her Volkswagen because she was as big as a beetle.
Yeah.
But she's a record bear probably. I mean, I'm not going to be a record setter, but I mean, it's going to put you in the book somewhere. But those bears don't get like that by just coming in and eating at bait sites all day long. They know.
Right.
And that last couple weeks of the season, depending on weather, usually is when some of the biggest bears are shot. Usually.
Yeah.
So I've got the patience to wait, and hopefully she's been there a few times and mostly at night. But I was amazed. I was up there yesterday, and I don't know how this is over on your side of the state, but we'll leave this, and then I got to get running. You got to get running, and I appreciate your time today.
Sure.
But are you seeing yellow bean fields and pretty dry corn already?
Yes, a lot sooner than normal, and I think that the weather has to do with that, but also like the dry conditions too. But soybeans are looking really yellow already.
Yeah, I was within a week. It went from barely yellow to barely green.
Yep.
And the corn, I pulled a ear the other day, and I could not believe how dry the corn was already. And it's starting to lose its color already too. And so I'm very interested to see how all of that plays into the season. I think things are lining up for both deer hunting and grouse and some of the other fall quarry.
Yeah.
I think it's all around. It's actually adding up to be a really good season. And I think a lot of people are worrying about, a lot of people worrying about things are the same people that probably look at the weather and decide whether or not they're going to go hunting or not. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because they've been exceptionally bad lately. I don't know what it is. It seems like they're getting worse, not better. But anyways, I love the weathermen. I still check in once in a while, but I just kind of walk outside and go, okay, lick the finger. All right. We got good wind direction and the weather looks good. We're going to go. It's just kind of what you have to do if you want to spend time outdoors these days. So, any big plans for the fall? Other than, did you draw a bear tag this year for Wisconsin?
I did not. I put in for one next year and I had 13 points. So I'm thinking I should finally draw one for Zone B. So that's my hope.
Is it that long up there?
I think the minimum points was 11, but I saved up a couple more to make sure that I was good to go.
Well, we'll have to touch base next year and do a bear hunting specific podcast with either you, or maybe we can finally get Ryan involved. But, now that you're going to be the Marinette County biologist, you'll have a lot more liberty to talk about bears on the show.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you draw a tag, I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
I'll definitely keep you posted on how I do.
Yes,
I'm getting
please
really
do.
excited. So, any other plans for the fall?
I don't think so. Just going to be trying to get out and hunt as much as I can. I'm excited to go bow hunting this weekend, and everything else is opening up this weekend. So I'm really looking forward to it.
'Tis the season.
Yes.
My dad used to put up a calendar or a sign that says, this marriage has been interrupted for this year's deer season.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one. I need that one for bear season.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Well, Alaina, it's been wonderful catching up. Thank you so much for the extra time today. And we'll stay in touch here as your new job progresses. And good luck.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening today to today's episode of Amaazen Outdoors. This podcast is being brought to you by Uplnd Outfitters. Make sure you're supporting our sponsors so we can stick around and keep doing what we're doing. Also, it really, really helps me out if you give us a review about the podcast, good or bad. I really don't care. Constructive criticism is always good. I love good reviews. That's always better. But a review, nonetheless, is better than no review. So if you like what you're hearing here, make sure you hit the download button to get all the episodes that I have coming up for season 2. But also take the couple extra seconds and give us a quick review. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for the Uplnd Outfitter pants giveaway that I have launching here towards the end of September, and find out how you get a chance to win a free pair of Upland hunting pants this fall. # be relentless, man. Good luck this season. Shoot straight.